This is Daniel Hale, broadcasting from beneath what used to be Midtown Manhattan. If this transmission reaches anyone out there, anywhere, please preserve it, copy it, pass it on. I don't know if it matters. I just know I need to say this out loud while there's still time to speak. As of 1904 Eastern, U.S. intelligence sources confirmed a series of inbound nuclear warheads. Multiple points of origin, multiple targets. New York is one of them. They estimate impact in just under an hour. It's strange what an hour becomes when you know it's the last one. Every breath feels heavier. Every sound becomes sharper. My hands won't stop shaking, but my voice still works, and that's enough. I'm going to tell you what happened here, what really happened. Maybe it's just for me. Maybe someone's out there listening. Maybe that matters. Maybe it doesn't. For the record, I was a journalism student. NYU. I graduated the year they shut the campus gates and turned Washington Square into a triage center. I was there when the protests collapsed into riots. I saw the headlines turn into silence. And now I'm here, speaking from the dark, counting down the last minutes of a city I loved. The streets above are empty. They've been that way for days now. Those who could, left. Those who couldn't, they're still here, hiding in basements, underground stations, wherever there was concrete thick enough to matter. But we always thought, somehow, New York would be spared. Too big to fall, too iconic, too central to destroy. That's the lie we lived with, even after the first city fell, even after the second, even after the East Coast was classified as a red zone. We kept telling ourselves, not here, not this city. I remember the moment the signal came through. It wasn't a siren, not this time. No warning message, just a line of static on the federal frequency, followed by silence. Then came the internal memo. Someone leaked it. Someone wanted us to know before it hit. That's how I found out. Not from the government, not from a broadcast, from a whisper. They launched, and they're not bluffing anymore. I was given a choice, run or hide. I chose this place. An old freezer room, 24 floors down, sealed and cold and full of dust. Not much, but the walls are thick, thicker than most. The generators are old, but they work, at least for now. And I have this transmitter. One more voice from the shadows. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to speak until the light comes, until the signal is cut, or the sky opens. I'm going to tell our story, not the military version, not the polished government line, the real one, street level, the kind of story you only hear when there's no more reason to lie. And if someone finds this one day, buried under steel and ash, I want you to know, New York didn't go down in silence. We spoke, we remembered, and we fought to be heard. This is still Daniel Hale, and if anyone's still listening, you deserve to know how it began. The first collapse didn't come with explosions. No fireballs, no countdown, just silence. It started with a city. No one said which. Not officially. The name was scrubbed from every live feed within minutes. One moment, everything was normal. The next, gone. No power, no signal, no voice, and no explanation. Some said it was a cyber attack. Others believed it was an EMP, maybe something cleaner, more surgical, meant to disable, not destroy. What mattered wasn't what hit. It was what followed. Panic didn't erupt all at once. It seeped in. People waited for press briefings, for maps, for someone to say what had happened and where, but nothing came. Instead, we got retractions, wiped headlines, identical statements from every agency, an isolated disruption, under investigation, contained, except it wasn't. Soon there were rumors, other cities going dark, whole regions where the grid had vanished overnight. No electricity, no internet, no escape. People started noticing strange patterns, like how all the affected areas shared certain characteristics. Transport hubs, financial centers, intelligence corridors, places with influence, places with reach, and then someone leaked a document. Not a map, a list, targets, probables. The kind of list someone builds when they're modeling a full-scale strike. It included the obvious: federal buildings, defense contractors, airfields, but there were other things too. Desalination plants, satellite relays, data vaults buried beneath corporate towers. Not just cities, systems, the bones and blood vessels of the country. Suddenly, no one felt safe. The media didn't report any of this, of course, but you could hear it, between the lines. When a news anchor stumbles and calls an evacuation a withdrawal, when a weatherman avoids saying the word fallout, when your favorite radio station starts looping public service announcements 24/7. I watched my neighbors board up their windows with no clear reason why. I watched soldiers deploy along bridges without ever saying who they were protecting us from. Some people tried to flee, anywhere, just away. Others locked themselves inside, convinced the worst had already happened. But the truth is, the first collapse wasn't the worst part. It was the waiting, the not knowing. Because if the first wave was this precise, this quiet, what comes next? We started whispering about targets. Not if, but when. Is the stock exchange still standing? What about the underground data farms in Utah? The deep ports? The space command centers? The bunkers no one talks about? The ones beneath mountain ranges and anonymous office buildings? And of course, New York. Always on the list. Always circled, too symbolic, too visible, but also, somehow, too real to imagine gone. So we hoped. Even as we watched the skies darken in places we couldn't name, even as the power grids flickered and failed, even as more and more cities slipped out of reach, we told ourselves, they won't go that far. They wouldn't dare. There's still time, but time doesn't answer. And now I sit beneath a hollow city, watching the final hour drain through the cracks in the world. And I wonder, did the first collapse ever stop? Or has it just been falling ever since? never said the word target. Not officially, not out loud. But when the maps were redrawn and our city was shaded in deep crimson, we understood. We were on the list. No sirens, no explosions. Just a quiet kind of suffocation. Being in a red zone doesn't mean destruction. It means you're waiting for it. Every hour, every minute. A city holding its breath, knowing the next could be its last. Everything changed the moment we were reclassified. Flights stopped without warning. Outbound trains were canceled indefinitely. Armed units set up roadblocks at bridge entrances and tunnel mouths. They didn't give instructions, just looked at you like you were already gone. They never told us why, but we knew. We were too close to too much. The financial arteries, the federal databases, the cables that carry the country's heartbeat. Too important to abandon, too exposed to survive. Stores stayed open for a while. Out of habit, not hope. You could still buy coffee if you had ration tags. Still catch a bus if you didn't mind being scanned and questioned and watched like a suspect. But nothing felt normal. It was like the city had been turned inside out. Lights still on, but no one really home. Empty chairs at restaurants. Trains that ran without passengers. And everywhere, the silence of things waiting to fall. The government kept saying we were stable, that proactive measures were being taken, that everything was under strategic review. But no one believed the briefings anymore. They felt rehearsed, robotic, like the people delivering them had already evacuated and left behind voices on a loop. Every few hours, there was a new rumor that Russia had launched and we were next. That diplomatic channels had failed. That a sub was seen off the coast. That the missiles were already in the air, just not announced yet. People stopped asking if we'd be hit. They started asking when. And so we adjusted. We mapped out shelters, stocked stairwells with water and plastic sheeting. We picked basements over bedrooms, learned to sleep with boots on and keys around our necks. Not because we thought it would save us, but because doing nothing felt worse. Some left, the ones who could afford to. The rest of us stayed. We told ourselves we were staying for our families, or our work, or out of defiance. But maybe we just didn't want to die on the road. They called us resilient. But the truth is, we were scared. Not screaming, not running, just scared. The kind of fear that sinks into your bones and makes you memorize the nearest exit in every room. We started marking time in strange ways. Not by days, but by absences. When the last newspaper vanished. When the last teacher stopped showing up. When the last elevator went out in a building too tall to walk. Still, we pretended. We had rooftop meetings, secret potlucks, whispered jokes about who'd get vaporized first. Laughter became survival. So did silence. No one wanted to admit it, but we all had the same dream. The flash of light, the wind without sound, the sudden weightlessness before the end. Every siren became a countdown. Every plane overhead a possible warning. Every moment a question. Is this it? And through it all, the city kept moving. Slow, muted, holding on. We were in the red. Not dead. Not yet. But every ticking second brought us closer. And no one knew what tomorrow would sound like, or if there'd be anyone left to hear it. Information used to be instant. News alerts, live streams, live maps. You could watch a war unfold in real time from your phone. But when the world began to crack, the first casualty wasn't infrastructure, it was truth. At first, they overwhelmed us with noise. Too many reports, too many sources, contradictions, retractions, updates that rewrote themselves every hour. One day, a target was confirmed, the next, denied. One channel warned of strikes, another said it was weather interference. One expert cried escalation, another called for calm. And in that chaos, no one knew what to believe. Then came the filters, quiet, invisible, websites that wouldn't load, search terms that redirected to security warnings, videos disappeared mid-play, comments disabled, an entire vocabulary began to vanish. Strike, radiation, launch. You could say them out loud, but online they didn't exist anymore. Social media slowed to a crawl, not gone, just hollow. A timeline of nothing. Photos of pets, recipe videos, staged optimism, as if we could scroll our way back into denial. Then came the shutdowns. Independent outlets blinked off, one by one. Podcasts went silent. Newsletters stopped arriving. Even pirate signals began to fade, either jammed, erased, or absorbed. And what replaced them? Voices that never blinked, never paused, never changed tone. Government feeds that looped the same phrases every 12 hours. Remain indoors. Trust your authorities. Do not engage in speculation. This is a temporary condition. But the silence beneath the message said otherwise. I remember the first time I heard something real. Not on the news, in a stairwell. A stranger with a shortwave radio had caught a foreign broadcast, barely audible under layers of static. The voice was broken, strained, terrified. It said something like, "Multiple detonations confirmed. East Coast compromised. Communication blackout likely permanent." They tried to translate it, but the words didn't matter. It was the tone, the fear in the voice. Not rehearsed, not filtered, just human. It didn't last long. A few minutes later, the signal was gone, either blocked or buried under another flood of white noise. That's when we realized truth was still out there, just buried, scattered in fragments across dying frequencies, whispers in the static, testimonies scratched into concrete walls, confessions broadcast from basements like this one. No one was telling the story anymore, so people started writing their own. Graffiti became news. Symbols replaced headlines. A red triangle near a sealed bridge meant checkpoints. A black X on a school door meant it had been looted. An eye drawn on an apartment window? That meant surveillance. Don't look in. We didn't just lose information. We lost memory. Moments blurred together. People disappeared without names. Whole blocks became ghost lines with no history left to trace. And in the end, silence became the default. Because the more we spoke, the more we risked. Not just punishment, but hopelessness. If you say the truth out loud long enough and nothing changes, eventually you stop saying it. Not because it's false, but because you can't bear to hear it anymore. But I still remember. I remember when journalism meant chasing the truth, not surviving it. I remember when fear wasn't the filter on every word. I remember when speaking meant something. That's why I'm still here. That's why this transmitter stays on. Because if there's even one person left on the other end, the truth deserves a voice, even if it's only an echo. yet an evacuation. No sirens, no convoys, no final announcements, just a slow unraveling. People disappearing in ones and twos, lights going out, apartment by apartment, shops closing without notice, trains leaving with fewer passengers and returning completely empty. At first, no one wanted to admit it, that the city was being abandoned. Not officially, not all at once, but strategically. The people with options were the first to go. Diplomats, executives, technicians, the ones who knew someone or had a way out. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't leave notes. One day they were behind you in line at the pharmacy, and the next, gone. All that remained was a mailbox full of automated replies and a door that never opened again. Then came the relocations. Not forced, not quite. Just a series of subtle nudges. We advise temporary relocation for your safety. Essential personnel may be transferred. Consider voluntary departure if circumstances allow. No one said the word refugee. No one dared. By week 2, the trains south were full. By week 3, the trains stopped running. The bridges were already sealed. The highways jammed and then emptied. Not because people escaped, but because they gave up trying. Some tried to drive through back roads, construction paths, even hiking trails. Rumor was, if you made it far enough inland, they'd let you through a side gate. Most didn't make it. Those of us who stayed, we didn't all choose it. Some were too old, some too sick. Some stayed for people who couldn't leave, or pets they couldn't abandon, or homes that still meant something even when the lights went out. Others stayed out of pride, or fear, or belief that the city was too strong, too sacred, too big to fall. And some, like me, stayed because we couldn't bear the idea of dying somewhere unfamiliar. Even in ruin, this city felt like home. It had scars we recognized, streets we knew by smell and sound. If we were going to vanish, at least let it be on familiar ground. But staying came with a cost. The deliveries stopped. Power failed sector by sector. Hospitals shuttered or turned into quarantine zones, though no one ever explained what they were containing. Water was unpredictable, food even more so. We became scavengers, not just for supplies, for certainty. A working radio, a still-lit hallway, a neighbor's voice behind the door. Anything that reminded us the world was still turning, even if it was turning away from us. Once, I walked 5 blocks just to confirm that the old bookstore was still standing. It was, and someone had written across the glass, "If you can read this, you're not alone." We started marking time in strange ways. When the baker 2 streets over finally left, we said it was the end of week 4. When the last city bus was found overturned and burned, we said it was week 5. When the sky changed, when it stopped being sky and became just a dull ceiling of static gray, we stopped counting. Some believed help was still coming, that convoys would return, that a corridor would open, that someone somewhere was still thinking about us. But hope thinned out like oxygen, and those who remained began to look at each other differently, not as neighbors, but as witnesses to the quiet ending of something vast. And now we wait. Not because we expect rescue, but because we don't know what else to do. We are the ones who stayed, not because we were brave, not because we were foolish, but because somewhere, deep down, we believed this place would speak one last time before it was silenced. And until that moment comes, we remain. Still watching. Still listening. Still here. Down here, you hear things differently. No cars, no footsteps, just the hum of the generator and the quiet ticking of whatever time is left. Sometimes I think I can hear the city breathing, slow and shallow, like it's trying not to be noticed. This basement used to be part of a storage facility, freezer room 24 floors down, walls thick enough to hold cold and fear. Now it holds voices. Every night I scan the bands. AM, FM, shortwave. Sometimes there's a flicker, a warbled tone. Once I heard a hymn, faint, broken, in a language I didn't recognize. Last night I caught something clearer. A voice, female, calm, repeating coordinates I didn't recognize. There was a pause, then the phrase, "We are still operational. We are not alone." It cut out before I could respond. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was a recording, set to loop for anyone still out there. But for a few minutes, it didn't matter. I wasn't just shouting into the dark. There was something, someone, on the other side of the silence. You learn to hold on to those moments. A warm can of soup, a flashlight that still works, a voice, even a brief one, that reminds you you're not the last. Sometimes I write things down, not to publish. There's nothing left to print, but to remember. I write names, places, things I saw that no one will ever believe. I write because someday, someone might find this place, might stumble across these tapes, these notes, this voice on a dying loop. And I want them to know, the city didn't vanish. It endured, even in darkness, even in silence. Out there above this bunker, the countdown ticks on. There's no evacuation order, no final warning, just the quiet certainty that something is coming. Something fast, something irreversible. They said we were in the red zone. They said there was still time. But now, there's only minutes. If this is my last message, if this is the end of the signal, then let this be the truth that survives. We didn't run. We didn't forget. We didn't fall silent. We spoke. We remembered. And we waited. Not for salvation, but for someone to hear us. And if you are hearing this, you are not alone. This is Daniel Hale, Midtown Manhattan. Signal ending.